and welcome to B Shifter, and it is John Vance here with you today. Nick Brunacini, Terry Garrison, part 2 of our Ask the Chiefs. We went out and asked some folks to ask us questions, and they did. And everyone who gets their question on the podcast will end up with a Bruno OG IC T-Shirt like Nick is wearing right now.
Woohoo!
They're cool shirts, so you'll get free ones for sending us questions. So we appreciate everyone who sent in. And like on the last podcast, we're using initials only, but these guys will know that they get their T-shirts, so they'll be getting them from Katie this week. So
we've become a fashion house, Vance.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, I'm modeling the very nice blue card and B shifter. You can get it logoed either way. Mine's got a B shifter Hawaiian shirt. There's 3 to choose from.
Exactly.
At the B shifter store.
No waiting.
No waiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sent directly to you. So.
But only 2 students at a time.
Yeah. Leave your backpacks at the door.
Exactly. Yeah, clear. Your clear backpack.
What is Terry the LP officer? Is he gonna? Yeah. Well, that's. All right. Well, we should get into these questions then before we digress too much further. Our first question comes from BW, and BW is asking, how do we maintain our service as a highly motivated paramilitary service as the social pendulum swings so far without offending the new generation? So here's somebody working with newer firefighters that, the paramilitary might not make sense to. So what's the take on the paramilitary setup of the fire service?
First of all, those younger generations, we got to fix them. What generation ever not said, I don't know if I'm saying this right, that the next generation is so different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then the next generation is always saying the one going out or the little bit more senior one, they're screwed up. So it's always kind of been out there, right? That whole... And when does one generation start and another generation begin? I could never figure that out. Are we in the same generation because we have gray hair?
Yeah.
You see, I don't know how old
I'm sure there's rules for generations, and they all have their own name. And yeah. Clicky.
So, you kind of, before I went goofy there, is you kind of said, let's start a little bit with the paramilitary structure of it. And Nick and I are working on this leadership project. And the very first piece that we had decided was, and it's all Brunacini's leadership over his history, and we're putting it together, repackage it, and taking it out. Only one thing we're doing is Nick said, hey, let's make the first part of it start with the work, right? Let's talk about the work itself, and then everything else relates to the work. So I think when we start talking about how we're organized and why we're kind of paramilitary, it has to do with the work. I think we start there and have a conversation about that, right?
Yeah. Well, and that just picking up with the work part of it is the leadership thing we're putting together is the work is the unifying force, and that hasn't changed much. It changes a little bit, but we started off protecting the community against fire, and then we added EMS in the 70s, and then hazmat and tech rescue and all the other stuff. So and then the customer service element kind of came into it in the 90s. It really did, because when we picked up EMS, is you had people customers instead of like acts of nature customers, which nobody really gave a shit about. The fire's the fire. It's an eternal force of nature. So, and in fact, Alan Brunacini, the guy who wrote all that, said, I did not make any sense of being the fire chief and in control of this organization until there was a customer. Until we hooked it up of what we do for the community and the Mrs. Smith piece of it. He says, because before that, we didn't have a customer. As we showed up and we put the fire out, that was the customer. So we were almost like a core or a cult that way. So I think when you started delivering a full spectrum of service, that became a bigger deal. But I agree with what you just said about the work drives it. So it doesn't matter what generation you are, and if you like this or that, you're doing the work, and this is kind of the way we organize ourselves around the work. And it really, the fire service is a lot like an apprenticeship. Well, that's what we were raised in. One of the problems I think now not problems, it's just one of the challenges, is today's generation doesn't see themselves working for the same employer their whole life like we did. It's you and I worked for the Phoenix Fire Department for 25 to 30 years. That was it for us. And then you went off to other places, but that was in addition to what you'd already done. Right. I think that's more the model now is if you get somebody who goes 20 years in a fire department, that's saying something. It's starting to look more like the cops did during our career, where the average retirement age for the police was 19 years of service, and you didn't get a pension till 20.
Right.
So I think that becomes part of it. But I think the way that people socially come together, especially, like you say, different generations. So you can have a 60-year-old leader and then a 20-year-old some firefighter coming in, and they have to somehow make sense of the age difference. Well, the work is the bridge that does that.
Yeah, and if you just look at the paramilitary part, so my name tag says firefighter, your name tag says fire captain, yours says battalion chief over it. It's really no different if you just kind of look at it. It's no different than the way McDonald's is. That's an employee, that's a manager. This guy may be a little higher up in the food chain, or you go to any kind of grocery store or any kind of department store type businesses. They have a paramilitary style, if you want to call it that, organization. So I think paramilitary sometimes gets used by us like it's somewhat different for us than it is from anybody else. But my wife, she was a banker for years, and then she moved up into the organization, and she had other people working for her, and she had a boss, and it was laid out real similar to the fire department, just a different type of job. That also happens in the fire service because we have a decentralized workforce, right? So whenever you have a decentralized workforce, you have employees that are not at headquarters. How do you get information to them? How do they get information back to you? A lot of that is done through a communication chain that matches that paramilitary organization. You got to use that communication chain.
You know, and I think paramilitary, you said it, we're not the military. Now, we're public safety, and it looks a certain way, but we don't. I think the paramilitary piece of it is that's as much as you're going to join and you're part of this. Right. This is like you're no longer a citizen, is you're part of a different organization that provides service to the community.
Nick, you made me think of something. So, when I was in the military years ago, when I was 17 years old, the uniqueness of the military from the rest of the folks I talked to and the rest of the organization I just talked about is that there's no what's that word they use? Fraternization between officers and the enlisted men. They have their own clubs and they go to different parties and that, and they are so much higher up for whatever reason. And maybe they have to have that because they're hazard zone in the way they work. But for us, we have a single level entry program. I've always liked that about the fire service. And when I'm out and I'm talking to people and they say, yeah, I want to be a firefighter, it's like the good news about being a firefighter is you start as a firefighter like the rest of us did, and you can move up in the organization as much as you want to. If you want to stay a firefighter for 20 years, we've known guys that done that and did a really good job with it, 30 years, right? If you want to move to captain or you want to move to chief, but a firefighter can end up being a fire chief if that's what they want to do and they kind of position themselves to do that. That's not as easy in the military to do that. You got to kind of go, it does happen, but you got to go through different schoolings and then you come out. And once again, you can't fraternize with the people below you, which is different from the fire service.
Yeah, and you got the uniform, but we don't salute all the other stuff. We're not the Army. We go home at the end of the shift also. So, I don't know, maybe it's paramilitary because we shop and cook and we can eat together. I mean, there's similarities, but it's still occupational at the end of the day.
There's some departments out there, though, that still line up with the Class A uniform hats when the chief comes in, and they are doing like military stuff, standing at attention, and
We were too busy going on calls and being a fire department to do any of that nonsense.
Now, I got to tell you, when I was in Houston, they did that. I would try to sneak in fire stations. I was there for 5 years, and 3.5, 4 of those years I lived without my wife there. She stayed here in the Valley. So I had a lot of time in the evenings, and on the weekends, I'd stay out of trouble. I'm not a fire buff, but what I would do is on a Saturday or Sunday, I'd go visit a fire station. And I remember one fire station, we've never had a chief here in our entire history of this fire station. We never had that. So I'd walk in there like I'm wearing civilian clothes, and I was like, "Who's the old guy?" And I go, "I'm the fire chief." Well, that got out, and then when I would start to visit, they were so respectful, the Houston firefighters. They weren't doing this out of meanness or unkindness, but that was their history. And I couldn't get them to stop it while I was there, but they would call chief in the station, and they would all come down from whatever they were doing. And I'm sure a lot of them were doing really important things, cooking, right? Mm-hmm. And they would come down and they would line up at attention, and then I would go down and shake their hand. And every time I did that, I would say, "You arrest chairman running for office. I'll be here all day." But they were being respectful. It was something that they were doing to I think make me feel more comfortable. I told them every time, "Please don't do that, Chief. You're not going to get us to stop doing that." You go in the station, you sit down, you talk to them. 3 of them sneak out, and they go out and they wash my car every time. Everything, just very respectful people. Wow. I had Houston firefighters washing my car when it was sprinkling. Oh. That was their duty. They felt like they wanted to do that for the fire chief. Very respectful, but it wasn't necessary. Right?
I was never a fire chief, but if I was, I would hire a pair of trumpeters, and every time we would go anywhere, they would announce me, and then I would come in and probably wear, I don't know, maybe a dashiki or some kind of a Hawaiian muumuu type of a uniform. Something with like 5 big bugles and maybe a tasting cup.
I think the problem is when fire chiefs or people in the organization think they want that, right? Mm-hmm. And I never wanted it. And I'm sure there's a lot of other chiefs out there who get that kind of treatment, and it's not necessary, and they tell their firefighters it's not necessary, and they keep doing it. I mean,
I talked to a guy who was in a recent recruit school at a department, and the recruit instructor went up to the dry erase board and drew what looked like dung, mm-hmm. and then drew you. This is you, mm-hmm. and then it was you're lower than whale shit. And you're not going to, you need to earn and they the chiefs refused to shake hands with the recruits until they graduated. And they were lining up and doing all the stuff that is really more military like. But I think there are people in the fire service that are misinformed on how the military actually runs. Because when I talk to military guys, they're not even doing that these days.
No, they don't do that. See, that guy who wants that ought to have a bugle, but it should be blowing from the other end.
Yeah.
No, you can't. Well, we had a guy tell us this week, we're doing our training, and one of the guys came up to me and we were talking about, I don't know how we got on the subject, but he said that he had a chief officer tell him, maybe the guys were standing there that said, "I don't care about you. I only care about you from the neck down."
Yeah.
You heard that?
Yeah, I heard him say that.
That was inappropriate. So in other words, I don't care what you think. I don't care how you feel. I don't care nothing about your family. I just want you to do your job. And those kind of leaders hopefully they're being phased out. And we don't see a lot of that, but that's not leadership. That's control. Any prison guard could act like that.
But I think the paramilitary part is our organization is designed around the rank of the people that fill it out. So you have a fire chief, you have assistant chiefs, you have deputy chiefs, and that's the way you divide it up to manage and operate the fire department, supervision, and then service delivery. So that's the part that makes sense to me. So, one of the things we would talk about is like in Blue Card is when you're doing like the tactical level is staffed by a variety of individuals across the whole of the fire service, anywhere from the secretaries from the training academy to assistant chiefs of operations.
Middle managers.
We'll fill in the tactical level at the incident scene. Well, one of the things, especially in like urban fire departments where you have rank, where you have lieutenants and captains and battalion chiefs, well, tactical level bosses in those systems are typically the chiefs because they supervise captains. I mean, so we've arranged that to the way the fire department runs because you have so many strategic level officers, tactical level, and then a bunch of task level responders that show up that are supervised by company officers. So that lends itself very well to filling out the responsibility positions within an incident org chart at the scene of a fire, let's say.
No, and you said it. So the task level, back to the work, the task level of the people have that direct connection to the customer, right? That's Brunacini would tip that upside down and say that's the top level of the organization. Customer is our focus. They're the sun, and they shine on us, and we reflect off them. So the top level, if you want to turn that upside down, if you want somebody who likes to think of it this way, they're the bottom level. It doesn't matter as long as you treat them nice, and they connect the customer, and then the supervisor supports them in a very formal kind of way, and a very informal kind of way. And we talk about autocratic and democratic. If you have a supervisor who is autocratic around a fire station too much, that's where you get problems. I got my own plate. I decide what's on TV. I decide what we're going to eat dinner. That's it. A fire station should be a democracy a little bit, to the point of now the fire captain sets the schedule based on what his boss said. Hey, we're going to go training next week, or we're going to train this day. In fact, in Glendale, they had Wednesday was always EMS training. So every day had pretty much some sort of scheduled training. And the captain needs to make sure that they show up to that. But everybody's got their, what do we say? It's rank and responsibility, right?
We were at work one day, and one of the A shift engineers was doing a shift trade, and there was a C shift captain that was working there, and they normally worked at that station. So we're sitting down to lunch, and the engineer gets his plate and sits down. Well, the C shift captain comes over, and he's like, "You're sitting in my place," and he says, "Well, let me tell you something. Food don't taste any different here than it does over there. So have a seat, buddy." He's like, "Well, and you could tell he was like, Gary Vance, I'm a captain.
I'm a captain.
Buddy, you're about to get some food on your shirt if you don't sit down." So we were democratic whether you wanted to be or not.
I got called into the chief's office once, and the chief goes, we follow the golden rule around here. And I said, "Oh, we're treating others the way you want to be treated." He's like, "No, he with the gold rules." And he points to his badge. And he was very autocratic.
Oh, but he was serious?
Oh, he was serious.
Oh, I was kind of I'd have to laugh at him.
He was.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't laugh. He's your fire chief. You're not going to laugh at him. There's a lot of firefighters that I'm sure they go to work every day and feel like indentured servants. And they feel like they're being, but Bruno said it. People don't quit their job; they quit their bosses. And Nick said it. The younger generation, they have what I've noticed anyway, is they have loyalty to the job, being a firefighter, but not loyalty to the organization the way we used to. We would stay and get if. It never happened to me because I work for Bruno, but there's people that stay in an organization for years with a loyalty to that organization. That organization never supported them, and they had opportunities to go other places and really do better. I think the newer I don't know what to call them. What's the appropriate? The people getting hired now, right, is that they'll quit an organization. It's happening in the Valley here. If they see a dysfunctional organization, if they see leaders that aren't supportive of them, and they have an opportunity to go to a neighboring organization, make the same amount of money, the same public safety retirement system, they change the back of their shirt, they go to that organization, it says this now, and they're the same firefighter in another organization. And I've seen them very happy doing that.
I think the millennials, I think that's who the generation is now. They're actually smarter than the people of my generation, and they have a little better EQ. You know what? You know, emotionally, they're more emotionally intelligent, and most of the time, they're not making a big fuss about things. So anyway, going back to the paramilitary thing. So you guys are saying it's a good way to keep us organized. It's a good way to keep order in the house, but we're not doing the hut. You know, that's not going to go well with.
If I had somebody, in fact, we should probably explain to our new hires why we have ranks and roles and responsibilities, and tie it back to the work and tie it back to a communication process. And just, I don't think we ever explain it to them that way, but we certainly could do that. And if you tie it back to the EMS scene or the fire scene, it would make perfect sense to them. But I think you're right. This group of millennials, they go right to why, right? We talk about that book and the training. And I think they're pretty much and they're not, I don't think they're mean about it, but when you tell them to do something, they'll say, well, why? Why do we do it that way? When I was coming up, you didn't say, why do you do it that way? You just did it, right? So they say that, and if we take a few minutes to answer the why for them, clears it up for them. Now, if they continue being, obstructive, that we got a different problem. But if they ask why, take the time to tell them.
The paramilitary organization and philosophy we use is like garlic and salt goes a really long way. And these departments that want to turn themselves into the Army, and we're going to salute, and we're going to have reveille in the morning, and we're going to do this shift off, going shift, and the flag, and the whole deal, is what the question I would ask is, explain your initial fire attack SOPs to me. What does a water supply look like in your fire department? And I have found, hanging out with these folks, that most of them couldn't explain that to you. The people in my career that glommed on to that piece of it were not as competent at the core of their job as regular B-shift firefighters sitting in a fire station. Yeah. I said, no, you have to idolate me because I have this rank and this. No. We're all here to go on calls. That's why they hired us. So I think as long as we use that, then we're good. And then you, like Vance said, you got rank so you can get the mail delivered every day. But past that, it's.
I think, you mentioned the military, so what's kind of the future look for Blue Card right now with the military and the incident command process?
Well, that's going very well. The paramilitaries, it seems, loves the Blue Card.
So expand on that, John. Give us a little bit of what's happening right now. I think that'd be kind of interesting to folks.
Well, it's actually the real military, because paramilitary, the real military. But a lot of the Department of Defense fire departments out there are using Blue Card to run their incidents and further organize their department and practice command simulations and everything else. They found it to be a great package. So now we're seeing it popping up at military installations throughout the world, actually.
Right.
Well, it was probably, about 10 years ago that the Air Force, and it was through Space Command at the time, before there was a Space Force even. So Space Command was all the Air Force bases that put stuff into outer space. So they launched rockets. And the guy that ran that way back when, John Staub, decided, I'm going to do Blue Card for all these military installations. So one of our lead instructors, Sean Glazer, that's where we met him, was he works at Vandenberg. So Space Command, I don't know, they were all in probably 6-7 years ago, all the Air Force bases that do that. It was interesting because you go around the country and you're teaching fire departments. And so there was a lot of the stuff, well, we're not doing Blue Card because it's not NIMS compliant, who uses this, blah, blah, blah. You think, well, the Air Force, how's that for the government? They're above FEMA, I think, right? So it was odd that the conversations you would have with paramilitary organizations, they couldn't do it because the government wouldn't let them, but the government's doing it. So typical in the fire service.
Because they're type 4 and 5 incidents.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's exactly where you need it.
It's safety officer stuff. This is the last thing. Somebody called me up and said, hey, Blue Card does this, the safety officer. We can't do it because you guys do safety differently. I said, really? Okay. I said, have you read the safety officer standard? Huh? Yeah, there's a standard that says that. If the NFPA keeps it, then the FDSOA maintains that. That all kind of hooks up. Read that standard and then look at the blue card SOPs to tell me. I think the only way you can meet the standard is by doing blue card. To be honest with you, really, if you read the standard and then look at the kind of the command organization for blue card, it supports it. So it's that. A lot of it is there's a lot of misinformation out there, and things that people think, well, this is true because Jimmy said so 3 years ago. And you're like, no, Jimmy doesn't speak English most of the days. So once you really identify what this is, it makes it a lot easier for everybody.
So that's so the second part of that question, because we don't want to let...
well, Terry, I think we just completely screwed this whole
No,
question
the second part. Let's go to the second part. So he talked about...
That was only one part question, though,
No,
wasn't
it wasn't. It was two parts.
Were there two parts?
It talked about the millennials and kind of when the thing shifts one way or another.
Yeah, it was how do we maintain our service of a highly motivated, or how do we maintain our service as a highly motivated paramilitary service as the social pendulum swings, without offending our new generation.
So that's the...
First of all, which direction's it swinging? Let's define that right now, damn it.
I wanted to say, 15 years ago, right? 16 years... No, it's longer than that.
That's a generation.
Right?
A whole generation ago.
So when Bruno was leaving... and they were looking for a new Phoenix fire chief. A couple of us with master's degree, he came to and said, hey, you guys have master's degree. Would you guys be interested in applying for the fire chief position? And we're like, no, we're not following you. You're awesome. But anyway, after some discussion, he goes, yeah, let's get some Phoenix guys applying. And we were the only ones that were kind of able to do that. I wasn't able to do the job. Thank God I didn't get it. But I was able to take the test. And so I sit in front of a panel for about 9 people.
So you had to have a master's?
Yeah, there was one. No, I don't know if you had to have a master's, but it was one of the qualifications.
Because the person they picked didn't have one.
It was probably master's preferred.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. But he wanted
So they're padding it with a bunch of people. Okay, we're going to have all these people with master's degrees, and then we're going to pick the one that doesn't have it. Because they knew who it was going to... Come on, they knew who it was going to be before they had the test, right?
As far as I know.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm sitting across from council members from across. I think there is 9 council members in there. Mm-hmm. And one of the council members, this 2006, and he says, so we're getting a larger population of Hispanics in the city of Phoenix, and a lot of them don't speak English, and a lot of them shouldn't even be here. I don't remember how he said it. I don't think it was illegal alien, but it was something to do with they aren't nationalized. And he goes, as a fire chief, how are you going to serve them? Well, I looked at him. I said, thank you for probably the simplest question that I could be asked today, because I would serve them exactly the way I serve everybody else. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they're different. I think they bleed pretty much the same. Mm-hmm. I think their houses burn pretty much the same. So my answer was you treat them like everybody else. So this whole deal about a pendulum and a shift in politics from the right to the left or whatever, I think the people that you're going on, back to Nick's deal where he said it so well a couple weeks ago, see that what I did there? Focus on the job. What's the job? Focus on the work. And the work is when somebody calls us, there may be some language barriers or whatever. Because I can't speak to the right and the left very well because I'm so centered. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's like you treat them, treat the work.
You know what you should have told them? That would have been so much easier. 911.
Yeah.
911.
We're there.
Nick, I just came back from Japan. I could have went uchi no benno naman desu ka.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but it's the same.
I went to the barn to pinch the car.
Yeah, but the thing is, you just so I don't. We talked a lot about a few podcasts ago about politics in the fire station and stuff.
That's a whole different question.
Yeah, we don't want to go there. We don't want to go there. But what I wanted to say was with this person where they're talking, with the end of this conversation is just focus on the work. Have your millennials explain the work to them. Focus on the work. Is
I
Is
noticed
it that simple? I don't know.
It's simple, but it's not done.
Yes.
So
Simple, but not easy.
yeah.
Well, I like the Vance a couple weeks ago said it. He says, the big issue in the fire service today is what news are they watching? So I've got this news or this news. My suggestion there is you can't watch the news. We're watching Sesame Street because that's how we're going to learn to get along with each other. God damn it. Yeah. The news is overrated and it's polarizing sometimes.
Yep.
I like the little old angry guys.
All right. So that's BW. You're getting a shirt. Thank you for that question. Let's go to our next one.
I think he should send us something.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long was that? Jesus Christ. That's 16 minutes, 58 seconds, or 35 seconds.
No, that was 30 minutes on that. So
Well, what the hell is that right there?
that's some time code thing.
But you're going to,
Vance, but I mean, we're rolling live.
yeah. we are.
Vance, you can't cut that down and make it like where it looks like we know what the hell we're
No,
talking
I
about.
played just what we did right here. This whole mess, damn it.
It's content, man.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Next question. JM sends this one in, and he too will get a T-shirt. What advice would you give to a department who does not want to move toward better radio communications, arriving reports, and command structure? So it sounds like they don't want to put in any kind of incident command. What advice would you give that person?
Buy a lot of good funeral uniforms.
Yeah,
I mean, communications. If communication is on every NIOSH report for line of duty death.
That's almost like saying, hey, I work for fire department, and we're not going to do blood pressures on EMS anymore. We don't believe in them. It just takes up too much time.
Communication is the fundamental. I mean, that you gotta focus on communication, and I couldn't imagine.
Do you ever go to a restaurant and you get just horrible service, and your friends look at each other and say, "This would be a great place to open a restaurant"?
Yeah.
Well, that's his question about fire departments. It'd be a great place to open a fire department.
It's back to communication. I'm a non-dairy guy. I got to communicate that to somebody, or else I'm waking up alone.
Yeah, we don't want to do initial radio reports. We don't want to talk on the radio at the scene of a fire. What do? Do they do hand signals? Do they do flashlights? Singapore? I mean,
sometimes you got
flags.
It's probably whatever feels good. Whatever they feel like doing.
They used to be the deal with the cops back in like the 80s. They'd shine the flashlight at you, and you thought, if the cops shine a flashlight for our help, you need to back up fast because we're going to get shot or something bad's going to happen. Yeah.
I wonder if, you hate to read into some of these questions. I wonder if
that's the best part.
Yeah. I wonder if they're they're that group of people who thinks the initial radio report is too long. Is that
quite possibly? I mean,
the first article I ever wrote was for fire engineering a million years ago. It was on initial radio reports. It was like in the mid 90s. And the letters that came back, there was like 4 letters, and they all were just so angry. And it was all old people, you could tell, like well before me, the great silent generation. And they were, and it was from issue to issue. So they kept writing, and they said, well, hopefully in his fire department, this idiot that they let write this article about talking on the radio too much is that there's people in his department that really know the art of firefighting, and they will keep him from doing this and hurting others. And you're like, Jesus Christ. So, do you think I'm pretty? I mean, come on, folks.
Nothing's more important. There's an entire function on communication, right? Yeah. Communication is critical. I don't know how else you answer that. Right? Maybe that's why we took so long on the last one. I didn't read that question ahead, but this is pretty simple. Hey, communication, I don't want to talk about it. How about that?
Yeah, done.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, it's kind of like, what do they call it? Hallway sex with my wife. We pass each other in the hallways. You're going to have to cut that out, probably. Yeah. Although it's probably one of the better parts of the show, I'm going to say now.
Right now it is.
Well, exactly. It's After Dark. We should do Ask the Chief After Dark.
After Dark.
Because that should be an upcoming thing.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's true.
Yeah. All right.
Now we're having too much fun.
Well, this will be a good one because I think you guys have some experience with this. Question for the B Shifter podcast, and this is from MS. What made you stay and not get fed up and stay, but remain engaged and relevant? Always hear about catching a new wave throughout your career to abate burnout, but what's the recipe? Thank you. I'm a captain paramedic with 23 years of service in the Valley of the Sun. So he's looking for advice on how to avoid burnout and keep yourself fresh.
I promoted to do it. That was always a challenge. You go up to next, and at that point in my career, when I first started, it was like, and I got 2, 3, 4, 5 years on. It's like, okay, I'm going to promote to company officer. Everybody want to be a captain. I'm going to be a company officer. So you promote to company officer. And it's like, I'm never going to promote past this. I've finally achieved nirvana here with my ego and what I do and blah blah blah. And after about 6, 7 years, you're like, I don't know, maybe. And it was but I found once I promoted to battalion chief, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And I had to embrace that. So that was the other part of saying, no, I was full of shit, and this really is good, and there's a lot more I can do here. So that was part of it. And I guess that's self-growth at that point when you think, well, yeah, I was stupid here and I kind of learned here. And that's a good thing because, and that makes you a better boss, I think, because you know that you were an idiot at one moment. And then, because the young ones coming in, the new generation, they're going to be idiotic in ways too. And you have to have patience with them so you can get them to where you are as a better person, an employee and the rest of it. So that's what did it for me.
So I would think that, that this person needs to, first of all, decide what is in his or her control. That's the first thing, right? Like, what can I control and what can't I control? And Nick said it. He liked to promote. So for me, when I became a firefighter, I was 19 years old, I found out, it took me a while to figure this out, but about every 2.5 to 3 years, I had to change fire stations. Like, I got tired of turning right. Mm-hmm. I got tired of it became mundane in a fire station. I liked the people, and it always sad when I left and went someplace else. But every 2 to 3 years, right about 2.5 years, I would change and go to another fire station, location. And then along that way, the fire service has a lot of opportunities, especially for a fire captain. You could become an arson investigator. You can get into some sort of staff position. That's a great thing about the fire service is you have a lot of opportunities to do different things within the organization. So don't get caught up as I have to do this my entire career, and you may find something else. And then last is you can promote and move up in the rank, and how much of that can you control? But you need to understand how much you can control. And if you're starting to get burned out, sometimes just the people you hang around and the conversation you have every day, you start commiserating together, and that you don't even realize it, but you're becoming codependent on each other and you're bringing each other down. And sometimes just moving to someplace else for a while helps that. Bruno used to say something which was interesting. He goes, if you don't like the way things are, just wait a day. He says, don't do anything, don't do anything too rash. Now, I did that in Oceanside. I was frustrated. I was there as a new fire chief for about 2.5 years. The city manager and I battled every day. He wanted to make a 2-person engine company. They had 3-person, and he wanted to make a 2-person. I said, I'm not going to do that. And him and I battled. That was a different situation. I couldn't outperform. I wouldn't do what he wanted me to do. And the next fire chief had to do it. He was an inside guy, and he made a 2-person for just a very short period of time. And then he moved up. Then he was able to get back to 3. But I wasn't even going to do it for a day because I went in there and I had an option to go someplace else, which was any place else, right? So, so I think that, don't get too frustrated. I think everybody goes through organizational ups and downs, just like retirement. Somebody said to me the other day, it's like, how's retirement going? It's like, I got good days and bad days. Some days it sucks. Some days it's wonderful. That's just the way life is. So, I just love Bruno when he would say, wait a day, just wait. But control whatever you can control. look around, try to evaluate your critical factors around you. You can almost walk through a decision-making model with it where you identify your critical factors and it's okay, what's my risk staying here? What's my risk leaving? What's my strategy on leaving? I think I'm going to go offensive and go out and or the worst thing is the hunker down mentality, where you just get mean and you hunker down with your buddies and you stay there for years. That gets old. So
when you would see those individuals, and they're in everywhere, they're in every single fire department, but they were productive, they were fun to work with, they were good at their job. And I don't know, maybe it's what it is it's getting to the end of their career, and I don't know, they're in the shadow of death, they think, or whatever it is, but they become pissed off. Yeah. And they're not happy, and they're angry, and they say it, the department screwed up, and we're getting screwed, and you're like, no, you're not. Jesus Christ, you couldn't. Yeah, you're a high school graduate, and you make more than your divorce lawyer does. So, and I think what it is their life has worn them down, and so and I find the more you said it, the people you hang out with, well, when there's more and more of those frustrated, angry people, it's going to get on you. So the more that you're happy being at work, the better that is. So for me, it was I never felt like I retired, as I had to leave one to do the other kind of thing. So I was pretty fortunate in that regard. But I got to see a lot of people throughout the thing before I left, and you could see some of those really good people, and you felt bad for them because they were miserable, and you could see it. You said, this is not a way to finish your life, man.
No.
The last 10 years is going to be a pain.
How about this? Tie this question to the very first one about the millennium folks and how they would respond to this.
Yeah.
They go to find another fire department and keep being a firefighter and find someplace nice to work and wouldn't feel like they have to stay in that organization. I know people have done that where they get really down and then they look around and it's like, oh man, that's what they're doing over there is really great. I'm going to go over there. And remember, the other thing is the last decision you made won't be the last decision you'll make, right? So you have an opportunity to make other decisions. Now, you can't go back home. You can never go back home. But you can go someplace else, and it may lead you to something. Chief Brunacini, and Nick knows more about this than I do. But when he left Phoenix, when we all got in the drop, I was less than a year behind him in the drop, and we thought we were all going to get to stay. The deferred retirement option plan, after 5 years you could stay, and this employer said no, everybody's got to retire, and Brunacini had to retire as the Phoenix fire chief. That was the best thing that could ever happen for him and the American Fire Service, because to think about it, if he would have stayed another 10 years, Phoenix would have been great. I would have still been there working with him. But I think once he left, he had the biggest impact on the American Fire Service, and he still is today. So
yeah, none of us be here if he had stayed.
Right?
None of it.
We wouldn't be
so
doing
sometimes
we wouldn't be doing any of this. So,
things lead you to make other decisions. Listen to that inner voice a little bit. And if you're that miserable, first of all, you're paramedic fire captain with how many years?
23.
Yeah, that's a long time being.
Yeah, that is a long time to be a paramedic.
You may just be being burned out from the task level stuff that you're doing every day. A lot of times, if you get in training, young people, if the things that happen for some fire captains is they get a chance to go to the training academy and they're around people that really want to be there and they'll do anything to be there. They lift you up, man. Even on bad days, you can't have a bad day as a recruit training officer.
That's like working in labor and delivery.
Yeah.
Nurses that work in labor and delivery love it. They love coming to work. And then you got the ones that work in oncology.
Respiratory.
And you're like, okay, they're all dying and they're all being born. Where do I want to be?
Yeah, so find that. Look around. There's probably opportunity, especially in the Valley here. If that person said she's in the Phoenix Valley, they're hiring all over, and they would love to have
what was good to see is like people younger than us now are retiring from our former organization. And one of them just left, and he became the fire chief in a far east city. Well, and Stuart hooked up with him. So there's some of them that are just like, okay, we had so much fun here. We're going to go over here and start our own thing again.
I'm going to take my ball and bounce
exactly.
it over here and hang out with these fellers.
Yeah, so it becomes like, it's almost like a gypsy circus that travels from place to place. That's the beauty of being in the fire service.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need to find whatever it is, and you were alluding to it, that is going to charge your batteries. So whether that's going back to school or getting in with a certain project or a group of people or some kind of physical fitness regime, there's a ton of things you can do to recharge your batteries, but it can't be about the job all the time. And I see people who get tremendously burned out because they're not doing anything but the job.
Yeah.
And that really wears on them. It wears on their family. Yeah. So to have those outlets, whether they're professional, somewhat related to your profession, or completely out of the profession. I mean, I love hanging out with non-firefighter people because those are different conversations than I have with the people I love hanging out with that are firefighter people. So I think you can find those different ways to recharge your batteries. And usually it's one event or one thing that kind of flips the trigger and gets you back on track. The other thing in my experience, and you might have had this, Terry, is the thing that burned me out the most as far as being a fire chief is the political process. I mean, I've had some great bosses and some great boards and councils and city managers, but I've also had a couple of wackadoos that made my life miserable. Yeah. And it was, I had one guy who was a conspiracy theorist, and he used to walk in my office every day. This is the guy who signed the checks for the fire department, by the way, and he was an elected official. And every day it was, Obama's going to come and take our guns. The rapture's going to happen at any moment. This is the end of the world. It's coming. I mean, that's what I heard from this guy.
It still is, John.
Yeah, it still is. I mean, he didn't like us doing business with FEMA because FEMA was putting together death camps. I mean, that's how wacky this guy was.
He was a knucklehead.
So you deal with that, and you're like, oh, that will burn you out.
Sometimes you got to look at those people as just entertainment. If you're able to, if they're not your boss and they don't cause you a lot of work, fire them up a little bit. Say, yeah, did you hear what I heard? Send them off
that
somewhere.
Ain't nothing.
So the other thing too with this person, because I do. I guess I feel bad for this person to ask this question a little bit, is ask, if you're married, ask your spouse, how do you like me lately? Because what happens is, I guarantee firefighters we don't like to talk about our job. We don't go home and say, I had this call or that call. But we go home and we bitch about our bosses. We bitch about our organization. We're grouchy all the time. And my wife's the one who said in Oceanside, hey, Terry, you need to get away from this place because you look like shit, you're not happy, and I'm tired of listening to you snivel. That's kind of the way it went. It's like, oh, thanks, babe. I'll have some more salsa. but that's the way it went right there. You got to have somebody that you could talk to that's kind of sees when times are good. Like Nick says, you said it. These people are good, and then all of a sudden, boom, something. Just like what the hell happened to you? That's a really good supervisor that sees that in their employees, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you are a supervisor and you have this negative attitude, is that really playing on your crews? So now, because the supervisor, you can't hide all your feelings, and now you're impacting your crew in a negative way. So you need to kind of make some choices and get over it, because you really do have an impact on people around you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's not too touchy-feely. That's real deal.
That's a real deal, man.
No, when I was with BC, you knew the guy, the supervisors who worked in your battalion that were not pleasant to work with. Yeah. And so you would take whatever corrective actions you could whenever you could. And a lot of that was just reminding, hey, man, you don't get to be an asshole to your people. So knock it off.
The good news is this person realizes it and they're asking the question. There's probably 8 or 10 people out there that don't realize they're in that rut and they're being mean-spirited and they're going home grouchy and they're not enjoying their job, and they haven't realized that they need to ask this question.
Hey, man, every single one of us has had bad periods, so it happens to everybody.
It does.
They've been writing a lot about this happiness study, the longest-term, largest happiness study ever done. Oh. Most people, the longest length of time. They said the number one thing is basically having a partner. Is people having long-term relationships is really what kind of shores up our goodwill and internal happy meter.
Not relationship with a bottle.
No. With other human beings, positive relationship. Yeah, not the relationship with Jack Daniels.
Yeah, that's a
I
bad
drink
one.
alone.
They say that. What do you say? You suck out of the bottle, and then the bottle eventually sucks out of you.
Yeah,
That happens.
exactly. That's where you end up.
Yeah.
So, and that's true. You could see it in the fire service. It's crews that like working together. There were stations that they just loved coming to work. And most of them were that way, thank God. That was kind of the good part of our career, is we got that bite out of the apple where it was kind of bliss for
The other
3 decades.
The other thing too that I always got a kick out of when I started having a pity party, as my mom would say, big balls and Cowtown. I would start watching people in other professions. Like yesterday, it was sprinkling out, and I heard something, and it was a blower, and the landscaping guy who does 3 houses in my neighborhood all kind of together was out there doing his job, making whatever, right? With his beat up pickup truck, or you're driving home from a 5 o'clock meeting or something as a fire chief. I remember that, and I'd look over and see some poor construction worker with a flat tire. It's like, that dude's not going to get home for 3 hours after he worked his ass off all day. So, sometimes kind of hold the mirror up with a lot of other things around you.
Little perspective goes a long way.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, guys. That's it.
Wow.
Crazy. If people have questions for a future podcast, they can send them to us. Our contact information is in the show notes, and we'd be happy to answer them a little later on down the line.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Get your shirt.
Oh, yeah. Everyone has a shirt coming to them that sent in questions. So look out for your shirts. We'll talk to you guys next time. Bye-bye.